know, yeah, they're being tricked. They're absolutely being tricked. I mean, look at the Bolsheviks, okay, at the turn of the last century. Bolsheviks means Bolsha is majority or more, okay? So the communists named themselves Bolsheviks to try to trick the peasants into thinking that they were the majority. They were not the majority. They were a fringe element. But the trick, the wordplay worked. And we see a lot of that in the last century here. Wordplay. You know, these people say up, and we're going to tell you it actually means down. And so half the population believes that the other half is saying something incendiary when they're not. But
Exactly.
anyway,
And as we know, the Bolshevik Revolution was also funded by Wall Street financiers, right? So
right.
everything was set up. And, you know, this is the stuff that's coming out currently through so many people kind of going back and digging through the history and putting all the dots together and presenting them before us. So we're beginning to see a whole different view of what's transpired over the last 100 to 200, if not more, you know, number of years, as to how these power plays have all been in action for a long time and have brought us to this place where we do have this monster, the behemoth of the deep state, kind of monstering ahead and charging ahead like a gigantic octopus, and people imagining they can't do anything. But it's interesting that with Trump, we appear to be having some glimmer or inkling of hope that perhaps something can be done about it. How it's being done, of course, I suppose is yet to be seen.
Yes, there's a lot going on behind the scene, and you do have to kind of ignore the mainstream media, or you have to view it like the Soviets viewed their own media in the 50s, 60s, et cetera, et cetera. They basically read between the lines. You know, they would watch a newscast and go, what did they not say? Or what have I heard on the street and how are they addressing it? What is it they're not saying? You know, what would be maybe the opposite of what they're saying that might actually be possible? So we're unfortunately having to do that on our own. We're having to look at YouTube, we're having to look at alternative media and see what is being said, how many people are repeating it. Is it just one lone person saying it in the wilderness, or are we getting echoes of that from other people who are independent media? You know, and what is it our mainstream is not addressing?
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know,
this actually brings us back full circle to WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks has done such an immense job in revealing some of those undercurrents and sort of showing us what these diplomats are saying to each other, showing us what the Secretary of State is focused on, and why this should be of interest to the rest of us, and who she appears to be sponsored by, even though she's the Secretary of State for the USA. So, WikiLeaks has actually, and, Bill Binney stated in his conversation, I think, over the weekend, something very interesting. He said the thing that WikiLeaks has done is it's put the raw data out there. It's put the emails out there. So anybody can go in, look at these emails themselves, figure it out for themselves, rather than, being fed a line, being fed party propaganda, either from the Dems or the Republicans. So the raw data is there for us to see. And, Julian hasn't really taken any particular sides. He has put the information out, it seems. So, more power to him on that level. So coming back to this question of him being a national security witness, clearly, as you've pointed out, if WikiLeaks is doing everybody the favor of revealing to us what exactly is going on, then the kind of scenario that you were talking about can indeed be averted. So it's along those lines that you are seeing Julian as a possible national security witness, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, Trump has got to find out. He's got to have some talks with him. Assange has got to be debriefed and given immunity, because I suspect that insiders in the Clinton campaign basically gave him this type of break. And we do know that some Russian visitors did come to see him in the Ecuadorian embassy. And that probably was to review some of this stuff to see how very dangerous that the non-Trump candidate might be, So I think they just wanted information so that they could totally assess who would be a decent leader and who would be a danger to not only them, but the world. Now, if they got to look at some of these emails to see the wheeling and dealing that was going on at the expense of not only the United States, but perhaps the entire world, then they would have a better reason to dig in their heels and say, no, we're not going to do this, or yes, we're going to do that, or to prepare. You know, if you have somebody who they think is going to maybe cheat her way into the presidency, then that bodes very badly, because then what else is she going to do? You know, she's going to put her finger on the button and say, Russia, surrender, or we're hitting you with everything we have. You know, just give in to the New World Order. So that's something they want to know ahead of time.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And the other question, of course, is that this is a human rights issue, right?
Gosh.
I mean, he's sitting inside the embassy, no nature, no sunlight, no fresh air, no connection with his family, no connection with his wife, growing, in fact, 6 years away from his family. He's literally in sort of, solitary confinement, or he's being imprisoned, literally. And, Cynthia McKinney made the point during her Unity for J vigil conversation. This was the last one. She made the point, and she really spelled out, I quoted her in an article, she really spelled out the horror of, being stuck somewhere without being able to walk outside and listen to the birds and, feel the grass under your feet, etc. Very, very important. I think we are all connected to nature. We need nature. And, she said that that's horrific, it's a huge human rights violation. Now, America tends to put itself on a pedestal as a huge, follower of human rights. Now, you and I know that that's not really true in practice, because I think we are national witnesses to something else that's going on in the US that we talk about every Thursday morning on Technocrime Fights Forum. So, we know about surveillance abuse, and we are speaking out about it. But this hypocritical kind of vision of America as a huge human rights champion is being even doubly questioned by this incarceration of Julian Assange, because obviously, if it weren't for the US waiting in the wings to imprison him, this would not be happening. The British police would not be, standing outside the embassy door waiting to grab him as he walks out. So the US is wielding enormous power here, right? I mean, the US could very well roll this back. Trump could do what? Issue an executive order to stop this?
Yes, I mean, he has multiple options, all of which are basically giving him immunity, saying we need his testimony, and he's a national security witness, bring him over, protected, safe, and we're cutting a deal, because we want to know about who are the criminals inside the United States who are betraying us and endangering the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see. So that would give a reason for the debriefing, etc. And there's, of course, all sorts of other awarenesses as well. I mean, the UN ruled in February 2016, I think, that he was being held unlawfully and he should be released, and he should be compensated, in fact, for having been kept confined. So, but nobody's honoring this. The British government isn't honoring this. The US government isn't honoring this. There's still time, right? All they need to do is go back and look at those UN papers and recognize there is a great need to engage in a human rights intervention at this point. And that UN ruling gives them the way forward to do that.
It does. I mean, when it becomes a crime to reveal the criminal activity of your government, something's wrong. You're being ruled by criminals, and this is something that ought to alarm people. I mean, the United States government, once it was embarrassed by the revealing of the Chelsea Manning videos that she sent to Wikipedia showing Americans, needlessly, gratuitously killing civilians. That embarrassed the United States. And then they obviously put pressure on Sweden to find witnesses against Assange to fabricate sexual, crimes that never happened. Happened. That was baloney, and eventually, I think it was 2010 that they tried to convict him or press charges against him for 2 or 3 rapes that didn't occur. And then by 2017 or so, the Swedish government dropped it, saying, these people we can't. This is just kind of stupid,
That's
and
right.
so we're not going to prosecute him. But they did so because the Americans put pressure on them to get him for something. I'm sorry, but if you have to fabricate charges against somebody to get them, then maybe you ought not get them. But then the Brits, of course, being cooperating with Americans, still wouldn't basically let him free because he was out on bail, and then he decided that it was rather hopeless, and he absconded. He disappeared for a while, and so they still have the bail charge against him. And they have spent, and I just read this and I couldn't believe it, they've spent at least $12 million keeping police around the Ecuadorian
Unbelievable.
embassy just in case he would pop out so they could grab him for the Americans. $12 million.
I'm
Okay.
sure those police had better things to do. I mean, is this what police are doing? Well, we know the state of affairs in today's world currently is absolutely grotesque with what the police are doing and not doing.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I could have fallen out of my chair. I said, good gosh. And this is for revealing criminal activity of people inside the government. They're that vindictive and desperate, to shut people up about criminal activity. Not
Because
about,
we are talking about criminals doing this from inside, holding the reins of power and trying hard to, stop the truth from coming out, stopping people like Julian who are getting the truth out there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's the
I mean,
unfortunate state of affairs we're faced with.
right, exactly. And you've got, look at, what is her name? Reality Winner. Okay. The young woman who was working in Augusta, Georgia at the NSA facility at the military base there. And she revealed certain things. And she's being prosecuted and she's being put in jail for doing that, where she did leak something. Okay. And then you've got other NSA whistleblowers revealing criminal activity who are actually getting worse treatment, even though they haven't broken one single solitary law. And
Which
some of
makes you
this,
wonder who the NSA is being run by. Is it being run by people who care about national security and, the integrity of this nation? Or are they criminals hiding criminality and corruption, waste and
right.
abuse, and etc.?
Oh, yes, because the absolute total full weight of anything and everything they can do, legal or illegal,